Well, wonderful, and a warm, warm welcome to all of you. It's kind of a bit of has a reunion feeling almost after the summer, with the joy of being together, of seeing each other, of coming together, and that's lovely. That's the kind of the proof, at least part of the proof of the pudding, that we have something to do with each other. So a warm welcome to this webinar of the CCE about the SEE. So just not to be entirely confused on that. We are expecting a number of other people. We had over 30 people who registered, so they'll just come in when they come in, and good luck to them all. I am going to turn this over to Catherine in a short second, who'll do a couple of further introductions. What might be useful, as we've done in the past, since this is going to be interactive, but we're going to have presentations, is that you, when you're not talking, and I think you've all done this, is have your mute button on. That way, if you chat with each other or your phone rings or something, it doesn't jump out to our presenters. So we're going to start with a bell, and Catherine is the bell owner. So Catherine, to you.
The bell master. Okay. We'll just have a little 30-second breathe together. Is that okay? Everyone hear me?
Thank you, Catherine. I'm going to keep my introduction really, really short, because we're here not for me, but we're here for the presenters. And the only thing really I would like to say is I don't know whether this is coincidence or whether it's karma, that early this morning we had, very early this morning, by the way, we had a webinar. Mind and Life Europe hosted a webinar with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. And I think it went very well. Amy, who was also on this webinar, was there, and Mathieu Ricard moderated, and Andreas Repstorff, a member of the board and a scientist from Denmark, provided data for the questions. By the way, you can watch this at your own convenience if you weren't up super early on our website. On our website, you can click it and it goes onto Facebook, or on His Holiness's Facebook also. You can watch it there, but ours is in English. And it was a little over an hour, and it was a wonderful discussion. And I just wanted to say how emphatically His Holiness spoke about the need for a different education. You know, nowadays he's kind of reduced the things that he's focusing on. And one of them is that we're all in this together, all 7+ billion people, and evidenced by climate change and global warming. And the other thing that he stresses again and again, and this morning very strongly, is the need for a different kind of education. And so I thought it was wonderful for those of us who participated as a kind of a kickoff to the day, to come into this mood of needing to have a different kind of education. And I know that he's been particularly keen on supporting the C-learning approach, and that we can have this webinar now to learn more detail and also to ask questions. I find, as I said, either a wonderful coincidence or a bit of karma at work here. So again, a warm welcome, and over to you, Catherine, for further notes.
Yes, great. Well, welcome everyone. It's 23 people is smashing. It's lovely to see such a good turnout. Thank you for that. I'm very excited about this. The C-Learning program is a very important program. I think it's quite unique in the particular combination of features that it has. It's a real banner program, I think, for the whole world. I won't do any spoilers by telling you what the components are, but I think they are really quite unique. The way that things have been put together, the care that's been put into its evaluation and the thought in that, and making sure that the way it's being transmitted, developed, cultivated, evaluated, is in line with the principles of contemplative approaches. I think it's a really important question that we can all be looking at, and goes very nicely with having heard from His Holiness this morning, because of course it is a program that His Holiness helped to set up and to fund. So it's a great day to all be together. Okay, now how we're going to organise this is, in a moment I'm simply going to hand it over to the three lovely presenters who are here, who are going to divide the time between them. If you have questions, please pop them in the chat. There's now 24 of us. And I will only interrupt the presenters if it's a question of clarification. So if someone missed something vital. Otherwise, there is going to be some natural breaks, which I'll let the presenters manage, and they will be taking Q&A. So they'll be talking for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A, and I'll leave that to them to organise. But I know that I think we're going to actually start with a C-learning practice. So over to you guys now. And again, warm welcome, and thanks so much to the team for hosting this for us.
Yes, and thank you so much for inviting us to be here today. I do notice a few eyes with a bit of tiredness, and I just want to thank those of you who were up really early this morning to still be hanging in there. It was such an inspiring context for our dialogue today, to hear His Holiness emphasize over and over again what Cornelius just mentioned, the importance of having a modern education of not only the external world and the 5 senses, but also the internal world and what he calls the hygiene of emotions, which is why we are here, why the Community for Contemplative Education exists, and why C-learning exists. So just a warm thank you to everyone, also all of you who are here today. It's a very unique audience for us to present to. We consider you as pioneers in this field of contemplative education, and I just want to emphasize that for us today, this is not only about presenting C-learning to you, but also to have your feedback and to learn from you, in particular about research and implementation when it comes to contemplative education. So really, thank you for being here. And just briefly, I'm going to present myself, and then I will let Tyralynn and Hans, who are here with us today, also present themselves. And then I will be, I have been asked to give you a taster of what a C-learning practice can look like. So we will do that for 5 minutes, having some feedback for that. Then I will be presenting kind of the framework, the content of C-learning, what is our program, what does it consist of. And then I know that many of you who are here today are very interested in research. And so we have asked my colleague Tyralynn, who is in the US and who is our house scientist, our associate research scientist, to present about our approach to research. Also because today is a particular focus on Europe, we have also invited Hans Burghardt, who is our coordinator for C-learning in Spain, to present their approach to implementation of C-learning in a European country. So that's the agenda today. We will have about 10 minutes each to present, and then, as Catherine mentioned, there will be time after each presentation for not only question and answers, but also a dialogue. And we have prepared some questions that we would like for you also to consider. So that's the outline of today. So Tyralynn, could you please say a few words? Well, actually, I forgot to present myself, but anyway, my name is Mikkel, and I just joined the C-learning team in January. I have been involved with projects within the field of contemplative education or secular ethics for the past 15 years, in particular in association with the UK-based organization called the Foundation for Developing Compassion and Wisdom. And for the past 3 years, I have been involved with the Danish government in curriculum development, implementation, and evaluation, with a particular focus on of social emotional learning. And I did move to Atlanta to join the Emory team there, but then in March, when COVID hit, then we all went to remote work, and I returned to Denmark. So I'm half American, half Danish, half world citizen. So yes, Tyralynn, please say a few words about yourself.
Sure, thank you. My name is Tyralynn Frazier, and I lead the research program here at the C-Learning in the C-Learning group. And my background, I've been involved in issues of emotional self-regulation and mindfulness training research for about the last 15 years. I started off doing some work with Charles Raison here at Emory and have continued here into the center. I've worked in implementation science, epidemiology, and biology. And so it was really nice to come to a place where those different backgrounds can come together and converge so that we can create a program on the global stage. And so I'm really excited to talk with you all about the potential for collaborations through research.
And hi, good afternoon. My name is Hans. I'm, as Mikkel said, the coordinator of C-Learning in Spain. And my background is at the beginning in science. I studied molecular biology, biochemistry. I spent some years doing research. And then I moved to a different field, which is Buddhism. I studied Buddhism in Italy, in Instituto L'Amason Kappa for 6 years, and spent some time doing retreat by my own. Lately, I've been teaching Buddhism meditation until I found C-Learning, and I started with a wonderful team of people. I started trying to bring the C-Learning to Spain. I'm glad to share my experience and the experience of our team with you today.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, Tyralynn. And I also just want to mention that there are other people in this virtual room today who are involved with the C-Learning. We have, I see at least Amapola and Olalia from Spain, who are also involved with research. And I just want to invite also the two of you to answer any relevant questions and also share your insights into this field. So I would like to start us off by sharing a taster, a C-Learning practice. One thing that we emphasize very much in the C-Learning curriculum is that it's a trauma-informed and resiliency-based curriculum. And I think this is more important than ever these days. A lot of children are experiencing a high level of anxiety, and it's not a blessing for all children to spend more time with their parents. I'd like to start to share a practice with you that comes from our curriculum chapter 2, which is about resiliency-based practices. So this one is called resourcing. So first of all, I would like to invite all of you to take a position that's most comfortable to you. And whether that's sitting or standing or lying down, and you can leave your camera on or you can turn it off if you prefer. And then just take a moment to notice the points of touch where your body is supported by the chair or the floor. Noticing the gravity in the body. And then I'd like to invite all of you to think of something which can be called a resource. That is something that gives you strength, joy, a sense of calm, It can be a person, a thing, an animal, a memory. It can be real and it can be imagined. Something that is meaningful to you, something that is connected for you with strength, joy, or a sense of calm. And I invite you to just take a moment and really savor that experience and try to be as precise as possible. Notice the colors, perhaps the sounds, any smells, maybe some physical touch. And just take your time. And then I invite you to notice what's happening inside your body as you think about the resource. What's happening to your breath, your heart rate, your muscle relaxation. And in particular, if you notice any pleasant sensations, you're welcome to just stay with that. Or even a neutral sensation. And then as we come to an end, I invite you to bring your awareness to your whole body and notice all the changes that have occurred since we began. And just stay with that for a few moments, please. And then slowly, and in your own tempo, opening your eyes again, coming back to the meeting and the people here. Thank you very much for joining me in this practice. I'd like to invite all of you to write in just a few words in the chat what you noticed in this practice, and in particular any pleasant or neutral sensations that you noticed. If you can just take a moment to express that in the chat. And also, as people are writing in the chat, if one or two people would like to share verbally some feedback for this practice, I invite you to do so. I'm seeing some warmth, joy, calm, softening in the body, gratitude. The monkey mind is settling. Some nice taste of apple in the mouth. Relaxation, calm, slowing heart, relief and gratitude, peace, gratefulness, warmth in the chest. So would anyone like to share verbally any feedback to this experience, this taster session? And you don't have to. So one thing that we emphasize to the children when and as well as the teachers actually when sharing this practice is that this is something which the resource wasn't actually with us at this time. It was something that was in our mind, and it's something that we can pull up and find strength and calm in at whatever time, in whatever situation. And the more we practice it, the more easy it will be for us to connect with this resource. And we find that it's actually very, very practical and very easy for the children to engage with this type of practices. And we have many ways of doing that with children of different ages. So it was just wonderful to share this practice with you as well. So I will say a few words about the program, the structure of the program, the content. Thanks for sharing, everyone in the chat. It's always very wonderful to read people's experience. So let's see. And Hans, can you give me a thumbs up that you're seeing my screen? Yes, wonderful. And once again, just emphasizing that today is not only for us to present C-learning, but also really to have a dialogue with you and to learn from you, from your experience in this field for so many years for some of you. So you have already met Hans and Tyralynn, and we have already been through the settling practice, the resourcing practice. And just briefly to emphasize that this is not only something we are doing with the students, but also something we are doing with the teachers, because the educator personal practice, as many of you are also emphasizing in your programs, it's indeed very important. So what is C-learning? So C-learning is a comprehensive framework as well as an age-specific curriculum to teach awareness, compassion, and ethics to children all over, in educational settings all over the world. And you see a print of our framework to the right. It's structured in 3 dimensions and 3 domains. The 3 domains are awareness, compassion, and ethical engagement. And we engage with that at 3 levels, or in 3 dimensions: the personal, the social, and the systems dimension. And I'm not going to say so much more about each of these domains, but you will, I will return to it in later slides. But with regards to the history and the development of C-learning, it is the culmination of over 2 decades of academic cross-cultural collaboration between Emory University and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And the content is very much derived from His Holiness's writings on secular ethics, in particular his book Beyond Religion. And the structure is very much modeled after Daniel Goleman and Peter Senge's book, The Triple Focus, in which they actually lay out the structure that we just saw of the 3 domains and the 3 dimensions. So what my colleagues at Emory University has done is to bring the content or derived from the book Beyond Religion and structure it according to this framework from this triple focus. And we have been very fortunate to engage with many expert advisors, especially from the field of social emotional learning, compassion and mindfulness training, and also the trauma and resiliency informed educational programs. So C-learning has been international from the outset. It's been developed together with educators from all over the world, and the curriculum itself incorporates the feedback that we have received from educators in the US, Europe, and Asia, in particular in India, who have piloted the program in the classroom since 2017. The program was launched in April last year. We were fortunate to have His Holiness present, as well as over 1,000 educators, policy advocates, program developers, and researchers from over 37 countries. And since the launch, we have had a growing global participation. Now, at this point, over 7,000 educators worldwide have engaged with the training in C-learning in one way or another, through some of our online self-paced courses, through online learning delivered by the Emirate team or other affiliate partners, and through on-site training. And here are some of the sites where we have been delivering these trainings. And so how does C-learning place itself within the current educational context? As you are all aware, there are many wonderful programs out there, including your own programs, and C-learning places itself within a very rich educational context of social emotional learning, peace education, character education, bullying programs, and as well as what I have been referring to before, the trauma and resiliency based and informed programs. So what does C-learning add? What is the value that C-learning adds to this field? And C-learning in particular emphasizes compassion and ethics. So that's definitely one thing that is a strong emphasis, and something that's added to at least many of the social emotional learning programs. It also integrates the last 10 years of research in mindfulness and attention training. As I mentioned before, it's embedded in and informed by the trauma and resiliency-based practices. It's a constructivist pedagogical framework. It prioritizes and gives voice to student, voice and choice. And it also integrates a focus on systems thinking and equity. Some of our core materials includes the C-learning companion, which explains the framework as well as the constructivist pedagogical model, and gives some tips to how educators and school administrators can integrate and implement C-learning in the classroom and in the schools. It also contains our 3 age-specific curriculums for early elementary, late elementary, and middle school, which covers about from kindergarten class to 10th grade in a European context. And our high school curriculum is currently being developed. And here you will see how the framework is translated into 7 chapters, starting with creating a compassionate classroom. Here we discuss together with the children what kind of classroom they really want, and how we can create such a classroom. They come up with the group agreements as to how they can create a classroom based on safety, trust, and compassion. Then immediately thereafter, and this is an important point for us, we engage with the trauma-informed and the resiliency-based practices before we do anything else. Because what the research has found is that for some children who come from adverse environments, even the practice of sitting down and noticing their own breath can actually reactivate a traumatic experience. So before we engage with any type of awareness practices, we teach the children these types of resiliency-based practices. And it's something as simple as tracking the nervous system, the bodily sensations, shifting their attention and away from a more unpleasant sensation to a more pleasant or even just neutral sensation, and to ground themselves, as well as a number of other practices, and one of which you experienced yourself, the resourcing practices. Then in chapter 3, we go into how they can strengthen their awareness and attention. This is very much integrating the research in mindfulness and attention practices. Chapter 4 is about navigating emotions, very much inspired by and based on the research done by Eve and Paul Ekman around emotions. And we also refer to the Atlas of Emotions that they have created. And then in chapter 5 and 6, the children start to explore our common humanity, how to build empathy and compassion for ourselves and others. And then finally, they explore the system that we are all a part of, and it culminates in what we call a capstone project, where the children are asked what they would like to do to build a better world, and then to engage with a project on that. So if you are interested in downloading some of our resources, it can all be downloaded for free on our website. The curriculum itself can be downloaded, the companion, some standalone resources, and on our YouTube channel you will also be able to find some guided meditation or reflective practices, as well as some voices from the field. Learning opportunities for educators right now includes our free online orientation course. It takes about 3 hours to take. It's a self-paced learning course. And then we are increasingly engaging in virtual sessions. And right now we are delivering a 3-session model of professional learning for educators called Getting Started with C-Learning. And that's something we are currently delivering in particular in the US, but are also planning to deliver outside of the US. So that was it from my presentation. Please stay connected, sign up to our newsletter, and email us so we can continue the communication. So now I'd like to invite all of you to ask any clarifying questions or any follow-up questions for what I have just explained.
Mikkel, I wonder if you could stop sharing your screen for a moment, because then people might want to raise a hand, for example. Thank you. Then we can see. There haven't been any questions in the chat box. I think everyone was too fascinated by what you're saying. And I have questions if no one else does, but I wonder if anybody would like to raise a hand.
And just to remind that Tyralynn will be presenting our approach to research, and Hans will be explaining more about a local implementation. So if you have questions around that, you might want to wait till they have explained or they have presented.
So it's questions about the basic principles, the framework, really. Anyone like to throw one in? Yes, someone, Jill Wagner's asked, wondering about when you might expect the high school curriculum to be available.
Yeah, so I know on the presentation it said fall 2020. It might be more realistic to say spring 2021. But if you're interested in receiving what's already been developed, the first 2 chapters, we're actually sharing those, and we are very interested in having feedback from people working in high schools on these chapters. So if you are interested in that, you can get in touch with us and receive a copy of the first 2 chapters.
Okay. If no one else got a question, I have one for you, Mikkel, because it's one that's really on my mind at the moment, which is how we apply the notion of trauma-informed. Sorry, Narva, so you have a question too. We'll ask you in a moment. How you apply the notion of trauma-informed. I was looking with interest at the order in which you do things, and you talk about building up resiliency before you engage in attention practice.
Yes.
And perhaps, and you were talking about finding safe places and nice places to be, rather than sometimes the emphasis in mindfulness is very much on being with the difficulty evenly. Do you want to say something a bit more about that?
Yes, sure. And if I can just share my screen again, because then I actually have just a slide about that in case someone would ask. And it wasn't actually planned that Catherine would ask this question, but it is what we are trying to do in the C-learning curriculum, which is not unique for the C-learning curriculum, but it's definitely emphasizing what's been developed in this field, is shifting attitudes from what we may call status quo of emphasizing that people are bad, people need to be punished, what's wrong with you. The trauma-informed approach is around acknowledging the suffering of people, and people need an effective intervention and what happened to you. But then we move even further with this approach to what we call a resiliency and healing informed, where we talk about the resiliency of people and that people need our compassion as they learn new skills, and that any person can learn self-regulation skills based on science. And we ask the question, what is right with you and what are your strengths? So this is our approach, and specifically what we talk about, we talk with the children. This is an example from our curriculum. We talk about the resiliency zone. We also call it the zone of well-being, and the children can identify with that. This is where they feel well, where they are flourishing. And then sometimes a stressful event happens and we get triggered and we get bumped into our high zone, where we feel pain, anxiety, anger, or we get bumped and get stuck into our low zone, where we feel depression, sadness, numbness, and so forth. And then we teach different skills to notice that, and then to return to our resilience zone. And just a very concrete examples here, what we call help now strategies, where the children, we set up different stations in the classroom, and then when they feel they need to, they are stuck in their high zone or their low zone, they can go to one of these stations. It could be drinking a glass of water, it could be naming 6 colors, counting back to 10, touching a piece of furniture, and so on and so forth. And these are just 5 out of 9 of the strategies we share with the children, and we also encourage them to develop their own strategies. So this was just a concrete example of how we work with this approach. I hope that was helpful.
Okay, thank you. We've had a few questions in the chat that I think Tyralynn was saying she'll answer in her presentation. But Nava, I think you had a question. I saw something pop up.
Thank you. Just to say that, first of all, thank you for the presentation. We are in Israel. In the Purple School Project, we're very much inspired by the C model. It's actually our cell model is very based on the C model, and I think it really advanced a lot of ideas in the cell field. So beautiful work. But what I was wondering was the usual question of, you have such amazing curriculum and deep ideas and deep practices, and you know, how do you bring this to the field in a way? So you say you do online training, and you know, it sounds like short trainings, and I'm just wondering how people are able to really embody these qualities and practices to bring them then to students and kids and different levels. So it's always, you know, the big dilemma and big question how to do it. I would like to hear more about that.
Yes, definitely. And I think actually I will just leave that question lingering, because there will be both Tyralynn and Hans will be speaking a bit to that, and then if you feel that something has been unanswered, then we can return to it after their presentation. But it's definitely something we are very concerned about, and just very briefly to share our reflection on this dilemma is, if you visualize or consider like a a two-dimensional model where on one scale you have like scale and quantity, and then on the other scale you have the quality. So what's important for us is really to find this sweet spot where we can scale the program to the extent that His Holiness wants for this program, while keeping the high quality of the program. And I know that both Tyralynn and Hans will be speaking to that. So unless there are other questions, I will hand it over to Tyralynn. Thank you, Nava, for asking this.
Yes, okay. It's Catherine here. Just to suggest that if you team of three keep an eye on the chat as well, which I think you are, then you can field those questions, and that's helpful too.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mikkel. And I really appreciate Mikkel for allowing me to come into this space. He, when he told me about the group and the presentation, he said, you know, could you come in and say something about our research? I'm like, oh yeah, sure. And he says, okay, you have 10 minutes to talk about our research program, what we're trying to do, how we've done it, and what are our challenges. So I'm gonna try to do that. So forgive me if I go long, and forgive me if I talk fast. Okay, let's see here. I'm gonna share my screen. And there we go. There we go. And Mikkel and Hans, if you can just help me yield the chat. Great. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about our global approach to research. Okay, first we're going to talk a little bit about our implementation strategy. We'll talk a little bit briefly about some of the research projects that we have ongoing currently, and then I'll have a few questions. If you have any other questions outside of what I present, obviously ask those, but just a few questions that I have that I would love to sort of hear from you guys about. So first of all, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about our strategy. So this strategy really is grounded in the work of our international affiliates and collaborating institutions. As Mikkel has shown, a lot of the generation of the materials and the trainings are really grounded in those sort of international engagements and input, and the same goes for the research. A part of this grounding has to do with this relationship between what we're calling standards and balance. So within implementation science, obviously you have the basic standards, the gold standards that we want to abide by, which include sort of tracking the aspects of fidelity that we need to track, while also engaging through the lens of cultural adaptation and cultural responsivity. Our goal in this whole framing is to create a program that has cultural sustainability. So another thing that I want to talk to you about is how we're approaching the development of these resources. We really are using a staged approach, and this staged approach is grounded in a number of meta-analyses and domestic and international literatures around implementation within the educational context. And what we found, and what those works have found, is that you really want to start with this sort of initial stage of creating a foundation. And the purpose of this stage is really to examine the phenomena of teaching and learning without yet explicitly linking it to outcomes. In fact, sometimes if you try to link it to outcomes too soon, you can be really problematic, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Then we want to go into this process of design and development. Right now, we really are living in the space of stage 1 and stage 2. And the design and development is really around developing tools, materials, anything that we can do to support the mastery at the level of the educator and at the level of the student. And that's one thing to think about, is we really have this 2-stage implementation process. So we're implementing the trainings and looking at outcomes, effects and impacts through the lens of the educator themselves. And we're also interested in the impact of the curriculum in the classroom on the students. And then stage 3, 4, and 5 is when we start talking about a targeted focus on outcomes. That's when you have efficacy research, where you're looking in a controlled environment, moving to effectiveness research, where you're looking in a less controlled environment, and then moving into a scale up where you're looking at multiple environments across different scenarios. But as I said, we're living in these 2 stages. One note about outcomes, and I'm sure many of you know this, but I like to say this as often and as clearly as I can. Outcomes matter so much. And as a program, you want to show people how great it is, and you want to do it with gold standards, with you know, randomized controlled trials, and you want to do all this sort of fancy stuff to say, this is what we have, it works, let's do it. But the reality is, particularly around this space of pro-social, social emotional development, is that there's a lot that we don't know, and to ignore that would be a disservice. So there are three sort of primary things that I like to focus on when I talk about why we don't jump to outcomes right away. One, focusing on the wrong targeted outcome. Our program is designed to cultivate social, emotional, and ethical development. So our outcomes are social, emotional, and ethical development, whether they are looking at compassion, whether they are looking at sort of the complexity of ethical understanding and cultivation, something within that domain. Those are our outcomes. It might be that the school wants to know how our program affects math scores. Our program was not designed to affect math scores. Now, there's tons of literature about the distal relationship between enhancing a student's social emotional capacities and their academic outcomes, but that is not the target of our program. And so by focusing on such a target, it would do a disservice. So reinforcing inappropriate outcomes is important. So, you know, we are coming through the lens of trying to change education, right? That's what this program was designed for. And a part of that has to do with changing how we look at what is important. And I love this idea from quantum physics that if you can't see something, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist until you can see something. And so the power of assessment is, if you can measure it, it becomes important. It becomes relevant. And if you measure it a lot, it becomes super relevant. Whether in actuality, sort of all things being considered, it actually is important. And so we have to be really mindful of what it is we're elevating through the lens of assessment. And then poorly measuring the right outcome target. And this is really important, particularly in the field of compassion science, because there's a lot that we don't understand about measuring compassion itself. And so we need to be very clear about how we're designing what we're gonna measure. Okay, I'm gonna move on. This is a big, complicated diagram I'm not going to go through, but I just wanted to say that this is our logic model within the C-Learning program. And so all of these different boxes are sort of targeted areas of understanding that we're developing sort of research questions around. But what I want to focus on is talking about some of the research studies that we have going on right now. And they're really sitting in this space of stage one, looking at our educator programs, how we're impacting educators, both through the lens of cultivating constructivist orientation and through sort of personal practice, and also the quality of implementation. So our current studies include tracking programs for training quality and experience that impact educator readiness. And we know it's really important. Knowledge acquisition is important in the context of these trainings, but what's also important is cultivating a sense of self-efficacy, motivation, along with pedagogical orientation. Because what happens is the real learning happens when they get into the classroom, but we want to make sure that they have the orientation that allows them to successfully bring it into the classroom. We're doing exploratory examinations of the phenomena of educator learning within our trainings and during the initial implementation process to really understand how best to do just that, how best to sort of really targetedly impact the educator. We're also developing tools and guides for collaborators and affiliates based on some of our knowledge gains. And these tools and guides, again, are critical parts of our implementation strategy because so much of what we're doing really depends on our collaborations with our affiliates. And we're also trying to develop tools for cultural sustainability that's integrated into the implementation process.
Catherine here. Tyralynn, take a little more time if you like. I'm conscious that not everyone has English as a first language.
Oh, so,
I'm
sorry.
No, okay. No, it's no problem. What you're saying is fascinating, but just feel free to go a little slower. Don't worry about time. Just.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Sorry to
thank you. Yes, thank you. Sorry about that for those of you who are struggling with, and of course, feel free to ask clarifying questions as well. So some of our tracking is really sort of basic, and it really draws from, basic sort of structures within the context of implementation. So within our educator trainings, we have the C101 that Mikkel talked to you about. We have our educator workshops, these in person and online, and we have, we're creating various other trainings also that we're working on. And within all of those, we have this kind of very general structure where there might be some kind of baseline measure when they come in to try to understand where educators are at. During the training, there might be some tracking that's going on. Either it's fidelity tracking associated with did you show up, did you complete what you needed to complete, or it might be more conceptual tracking about are you shifting in your understanding as you're going through this. And then end of training measures, and those just have to do with sort of either evaluation of the training itself or sort of post a repeat of the survey initially given to try to see if we can understand any changes that might have happened as a result of the training. And then we're also integrating processes of follow-up. Okay, as far as our domestic schools, the way we're approaching our work right now at the domestic stage is really using some of our schools as sort of study labs to try to really understand how can we best develop these high quality materials, how can we really understand what change looks like in our students and in our educators. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about three schools in a district that we're working with right now. Woodward is one of the largest independent private schools in the Southeast. It actually has a unusually high amount of diversity within the population, sort of along both race and, believe it or not, economic strata. So it's a really interesting place to work for us, and we have a very close relationship with them. And so what we've been doing there is we've been doing a lot of the phenomenological work around understanding educators and educator pedagogical orientation within that context. And we're trying to work closely with some of those teachers to actually develop out some of our sort of educator support tools. At the Condesi School is a public school here in the US, and all of these are based in Atlanta right now, is here in the US, and we've been working with them. It is called a majority minority school, so it has majority middle to low socioeconomic income students and primarily African American students in the population that they serve. And we've been working with them to understand how to build supports around communicating and developing strategies for cultural responsivity within the classroom. And when we talk about cultural responsivity, we use this not just sort of broad strokes culture like the German culture or the US culture or the Spanish culture, but we're really talking about the diversity that a teacher will face within their classroom context, and how do they sort of manage that, and how do we integrate that management into the C-learning work. The Women's Resources Center is a center that serves families that are leaving or have been experiencing situations of domestic violence. And they have a summer camp that we've been going into for the last couple of years. And last year we sort of really did a lot of grounded theory, on the ground work with those students to try to understand change and change through the lens of C-learning in order to inform our model of change at the level of the student. And we've just started working and really excited about the work that we're doing right now with City Schools of Decatur. So this is where we're really trying to develop our district-wide processes. So we've just gone in and started working at the district level, and we're filtering down to all of the schools within that district, and we're trying to develop sort of district-wide tracking processes and sort of whole district tools particularly to create communications for affiliates to really understand how do we do this work sustainably at the district level. And what I'm showing you here is, because I'm using this word cultural responsiveness, and I know it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so a lot of our phenomenological and grounded work, qualitative work around what this is, has pulled up these different sort of domains. So I'm not going to read all of these to you, but these are kind of the key areas of consideration when we're talking about, when I'm using this language. You can look through some, and I'm going to probably change the slide before you can look through all of them. Okay. So what I'm showing you here is the process for fidelity tracking. This is this is how it's living in its most complex form. And we can talk more about this. If you have any questions, I can break down what each of these different stages or phases are. But one of the things that we're doing right now that we already have drafted out is an assessment guide for fidelity tracking that takes this particular framing. We break it down into, in its simplest form, what can you do? And we're building out to sort of in its most complex form, what can you do if you're trying to sort of track within your region. And so that guide really sort of breaks down this model. As I said, we're also developing out an educator toolkit where we're really trying to connect with educators domestically and internationally, and to create this tool that is really a global sort of co-construct between researchers and educators. And culturally sustainable implementation. This is where we're developing out guidance and guidelines for what culturally sustainable implementation is, what it means, and how do we get there. And this is just an example of one of the guides, the implementation roadmap that we're drafting out now, which is broken down into these different stages, 1 through 5. And then within each of those stages, we talk about all of the different levels for effective implementation. And it, again, minimally, what do you need to do for effective implementation? And then, of course, maximally, what can you do as well? Okay. So International Sea Learning Study Labs. So I wanted to pull this up. We're actually working with a number of partners around the globe on studies, trying to build research foundation for studies to partner with sea learning. I'm focusing here on the European affiliates. So of course we have Hans with Sea Learning Spain. We also have Amapola and Eulalia, who are here with us today. So if you have any questions about this work or what we've been doing with them, please feel free to reach out. I think Corinna is also a part of this group, though I don't think she's here today. But all of what we've been doing is really trying, again, to lay the foundation for research for the development of regional implementation tracking processes for fidelity monitoring. Again, this sort of understandings, these very basic exploratory understandings of educator support and sustainable implementation. And then also at the international level, where we're really trying to work with affiliates to understand how to work with regional governments to build collaborative support for sustainability. This has been particularly true with some of our collaborators in the Ukraine and in Colombia and in India as well. So that's the entirety of what we're trying to do, some examples of how we're trying to do it, and then this is just some challenges that we currently have that I would love your feedback on. Communicating standardized processes, cultural responsivity, and then of course, collaboration. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, but if you have any questions and you wanna see something again, I'm happy to share it again. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Okay, there's a question from Wolfgang, which is about cultivating alliances with policymakers, how you go about that.
So right now it's really, we're still in a learning process where we're really trying to figure out how best to do that. And we're doing it case by case. And so what we've been doing is we've been working with, for example, we've been working with our partners in Colombia, talking about what is the capacity they currently have, what are the interests and needs at the national level, and how do we make connections sort of between their organization and the national level to try to support their governments and their needs, either for understanding pro-social development in their populations or some other broader understandings, and how do we link that with sea learning. And so this is really a process that we're trying to develop out. And we're having this conversation. A lot of it has to do with trying to figure out funding lines and how to establish those, how to be sort of governmentally sensitive. And that's really important because the goal isn't to come in to tell the government how much they're doing wrong, but to sort of really take a strength-based approach to that conversation as well. And I can talk, we can talk sort of more specifically if you want to, but right now it is sort of this growing learning process that we're going through right now.
Thank you. You had some questions for people, I think.
I did have questions, and I see a question from Mikkel.
I just posted the questions that were at in the end of your slide. So I just.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yes. Just to say that you're asking about, you know, building capacity for research, working together across Europe. Just to say, we haven't cracked it in the CCE, but that was exactly what the CCE was set up to try to do. You know, we're not just a talking shop, we're trying to develop work together. I would just comment that one of the problems that we hit all the time is people's time. You know, what is the incentive? How do we facilitate that kind of working across programs and across research? Everyone is so pressurized where they are with their own goals and their own needs, that people are happy to talk about things. And there have been some small collaborations, but doing anything large, we found probably needs some major funding, like European Union funding or something of that sort. I mean, I get others in the CC will have better answers to that than me, but that's certainly been our experience. Not a lack of willingness, it's just simple time pressures on each of us as individuals.
Yeah.
I mean, that must be the same in the United States, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've been trying to do is, you know, we've developed this strategy that's really working for connecting with organizations, which usually are sort of nonprofits of some type. The other thing that we're trying to develop are strategies for linking with researchers or research groups globally. And sort of how do we, just like you said, how do we create kind of a synergistic and dynamic collaboration so that there is, you know, everybody's needs are met, and we're also able to sort of support what we need to support within the program. So any input or conversation around that is always really helpful.
Well, we can continue that conversation. Noah, you got a question. Do you want to put it yourself?
As I was asking, because you were talking about sort of cultural adaptation, I was wondering if you have some sort of like a diagnostic process to see what specifically the school needs to help tailor the program.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're doing and we include this when we discuss with affiliate organization around implementation, is school readiness. Like, where's the school at as far as their sort of capacities for bringing C-learning in? It doesn't mean that this is a limitation from them. Any school can bring it in at any time, but if they want to have, if they're following sort of this targeted strategic plan, you know, it's important to understand where they are at. And a part of the support of the school also is really looking at some kind of a assets assessment. You know, everything that we do is really grounded in this strength-based language. And so what do they already have, either the school or the community in which the school is embedded? What do they already have on the ground that could support this work? And how do we build up from that? So even if a school isn't 100%, you know, if they don't have the capacity or the resources to really engage C-learning fully, what does it mean to actually sort of support a school so that they can actually bring it into their educators and students?
Okay, I'm going to suggest we move on to hands next, just because of time. What I would suggest, if anybody's got questions in the, you know, put them in the chat, and I'm seeing the team very kindly answering them as we go anyway. So if we use the chat and the presentation working together, I think we should get our questions answered. Is that okay, Tyralynn? Thank you oh so much. Conscious of what a rich presentation this is. We've gathered that we'll be able to have the slides afterwards, so that's great. Hans, do you want to move on?
Yes, thank you very much, Tyralynn, Mikkel, and Catherine. Well, let me share this short presentation that it's aimed to convey a little bit which has been our experience in relation to C-learning for the last 1.5 years. It feels strange for some of us, but we started only 1.5 years, and looking at the accomplishments, it feels like it was much longer ago. Well, we started, as I said, 1.5 years ago. We discovered of this program. Most of the people who is involved in the implementation of C-learning in Spain are aware since many years ago of the need of this kind of education. And we find that C-learning gives answer to many of the questions and many of the limitations that one might have in trying to deliver this kind of education to schools. I will speak roughly on the challenges and goals we established, strategy and implementation, our experience so far, and I will leave also space for your feedback and questions. Well, in regards to our challenges and goals, the first thing we wanted in relation to this program is to make sure that we preserve the spirit of the program, which is collaborative and it's non-profit. We were aware that we needed to adapt and translate the materials to our cultural context and even legal context. To establish a training and implementation strategy that suits the Spanish educational system. To train educators in a peer-to-peer training from educators for educators mainly. To evaluate the program and its adaptations, to support educators and supervise training and implementations to ensure quality and fidelity. Obviously, to sustain all this financially. And then that might be the last goal, to present the results and conclusions to decision makers to facilitate a change in education to incorporate this kind of education. Well, this is a quick overview on how we approach the implementation strategy that includes research, adaptation. The center at Emory gives training to a group of people, mainly educators. We get these persons then are able to give training and support to individual educators or schools. And from these educators, we expect to have also a source of support for educators trained in the C-learning, but also we aim to recruit our facilitators from these already trained educators who have been trying the materials at their classrooms. Emory also provides us with materials, but we understood that we have to adapt these materials. So we have also a committee, we have established a committee to perform the translation and adaptation of the program. With the educators trained, obviously, we aim to implement the C-learning in classrooms or ideally in schools at their entirety. And from these implementations, we expect to perform, especially at the first stages, evaluation and adaptation. That helps us give feedback to this translation committee that also performs the adaptation of the materials, and of course, to give feedback back to Emory. And for this, we establish, sorry, yes.
I'm sorry, there was a question that maybe you can address the IE. What does that stand for?
Sorry?
In your slide.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah, I wrote it down and I didn't mention it, yeah, sorry. It's the NPO we have established to make all this happen, to have a legal organization backing up the entire project. Sorry about that. Yeah, I forgot to to mention what this means. It's an acronym for Instituto para la Educación Emocional, Ética y Social. It's the name in Spanish of this NPO, a non-profit.
Can you tell us what NPO means, please?
Yes, non-profit organization.
Ah, right. Sorry. Thanks.
Yes. No, thank you, Catherine. Yes. Well, and on the basis of this legal organization, we established an alliance with Emory, and we became the affiliates in Spain for the C-learning. Well, some key aspects we identified in relation to this implementation strategy. In regards to adaptation, we understood that adaptation is not just idiomatic or cultural adaptation. We also have to bear in mind that there are some legal requirements and boundaries that we have to make sure are included in the materials, in trainings. We also understand that it's extremely important to adapt materials and training to the educational system and the mental setup of educators in Spain. And for this, we understand that research has a central role. In regards to implementation and training, we decided to follow the following model. We start with selected centers. We train educators to implement the C-learning at their classrooms in these selected centers. Among these educators, we recruit facilitators to train other educators in the region and repeat this process, facilitating the spread of the C-learning gradually from one school to the other, from one region to the other, and giving the main responsibility to educators themselves. Obviously, in the midterm, and this is something that has to be yet developed also by the team at Emory, we bear in mind that we should focus also on pre-service training. Then in regards to facilitators, main facilitators, we aim we seek as main facilitators active educators. This doesn't exclude content experts, persons who have an expertise in relevant fields like contemplative practice or compassion training, but we would like to see as main facilitators persons who are in classrooms experiencing the materials, so they have an experience of what to deliver C-training is. Then training is mainly given in our model. Our idea is to mainly give this training at official training centers. And these are regulated. It has some advantages. It has also inconvenience, but it's a way also to enter in the official educational system. And teachers, especially in public schools, they prefer to get the trainings in these centers because then these are homologated and are valid for their curriculum. They have to perform every year some hours of professional development. And if we teach them, if we offer the training in these centers, this is given to them. Then also ourselves as affiliate, a regional affiliate, we organize the trainings and manage the facilitators. And as organizers, we aim to give the same economic retribution to all facilitators, no matter where they teach. And this is to prevent having freelance facilitators who slowly get away from the fidelity or start facilitating in a different way or changing the training, and also to prevent an economical divide, having facilitators who prefer to go to private schools who pay more and finding that no one is willing or wishes to train educators from public schools. Then, of course, we understand that we have to create a network to support facilitators and educators, and we are also trying to imagine how to create this network of support. Above all, we understand that we should ensure fidelity, quality, and that even that the project, and that the project remains open yet supervised. And this is also very important for us, belonging to the educational system, so involving educators in the project. On these first 2 years, we have established the MPO. This is our current state where we are now. We have established this MPO, became C-learning affiliates, and we have started translating and adapting the materials, and we have started developing an implementation and research plan, exploring all the different possibilities to implement the C-learning in classrooms here in Spain. Then for years 2 and 3, we expect to complete a non-profit business plan to seek funds. And we have started self-training of selected candidates in 2 regions under with the collaboration of the University of Girona and the University Pablo Olavide of Sevilla. Then we have started training with Emory C-Learning's team, and we expect for the following years to start pilot implementations at selected centers, supervise and evaluate such implementations, to perform further adaptation, and also to start offering training at these official teacher trainings I mentioned before, which probably it's going to happen on January next year. And then, of course, once the model is established, to scale up this model to other regions. Our experience so far with Emory and with the learning, we find very relevant, or more relevant aspects, the framework itself, the curriculum, that it's genuinely a collaborative project. We have this feeling with Emory of being equals, of being taken seriously, even if we are not there in the States. It also feels as an international project in which all different countries are contributing. And we appreciate very much this cultural responsiveness, and also that diversity and equity are core aspects of the framework and the curricula. Less relevant aspects, we find sometimes the curricula have too much repetition, sample scripts or instructions. It's a minor point, it's not a big deal. It's just Mikkel asked me to include the less relevant aspects, so I had to think about this. Also the C101, this introductory course, in our opinion, it's not enough, it's just a taster. We think that educators have to embody the C-learning, and in this regard, this program is a bit limited, but other than this, our experience, it's very positive. I wanted to, sorry, yes.
Sorry, yes. Just to say, we need to finish in 10 minutes. So
yes,
that people,
I'm finishing, yes.
Okay, just make sure you say
sure.
the key things you want to say. Yes. Thank you.
Just one small thing, but for me it's extremely important. Just acknowledging that this is the work of all these persons that you can see in this slide. Some of them are spending a lot of hours for free, or even spending personal resources. And for me, this is something inspiring, and that makes me feel a lot of joy. I'm not exaggerating when I say that there are hundreds, more than 1,000 hours behind the work we've been doing. So just to express this gratitude to all these persons. And then to finish, I also have a request for feedback, and I will welcome your questions. Feedback on funding, on ensuring fidelity and quality while scaling up from 2 regions to the entire country, and also on supervision and support. Well, that's mainly it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I think by feedback, Hans, you're meaning not questions about you, but from comments from the group that you might find helpful.
Both things. Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone want to just throw a comment or question in? I've found this fascinating. It's such a rich presentation, I must say.
Thank you.
Stunned silence across Europe.
I can say, first of all, that I really resonate with the dreams, you know, to think of a way in a program to actually bring it, to think small and wide in the same time. I mean, not just what we're doing in one school, but really trying to think how are we going to do it in many places. So it's really exciting and inspiring. And I can say that for us, the one approach we thought that we should, talking about your scaling up question, is I think that there should be a lot of like implementation science inside. So to really be able to find ways to have data and to understand what's happening on the grounds, to be able to adapt to different contexts as we grow. So, for example, we are we think a lot about it. I'm not sure we have answers, but we really think a lot about this issue of how to create a program that actually the teachers and the staff themselves will be asking questions about the fidelity, so that we can so we can respond and help to ensure that things are happening. And also for all of you, for the 3 presenters, which really great presentations, but I would like to ask, how how do you deal with like motivation? I saw that Rob Roser is one of your advisors. So, you know, how do we create internal motivation for such a program? So there's one thing when you say, okay, whoever wants to learn about the C program, come and learn. But what happens when you go to a school and you go to a district?
Yeah.
Not all the teachers actually are interested in this.
Can I speak to that, you guys? A couple of things. One of the things that I really loved the way, Hans, the way you so carefully laid out what you're doing. And one of the things that when I say that our strategy for implementation is a global one, it really is learning from what our affiliates are doing, because we can't do this. Like, it's not sustainable. But then bringing our knowledge and expertise around, for example, implementation science, to say, let's integrate this measure that we know really needs to be integrated, and let's integrate it in this way. You know, obviously considering capacity on the ground so that we can track. The other thing too is in some of our domestic sites, the reason that we call them sort of learning labs is just that, is to understand how do we, one, it's a gradual process. So we don't recommend that schools give it to every student, every educator, every classroom in the school right away, but really start with a small group of educators, cultivate communities of practice, you know, build up their facilitation capacities the way that Hans was talking about it, and really integrate it in a way that grows transformatively into the space and into within the school community. Mm-hmm. While that is happening, we are learning to trying to understand how do we improve our materials and our trainings so that that can happen even better or faster, or in a way that really leads to that sort of notion of sustainability. Sorry, my went off.
Yeah, if I may, yeah, I think this is extremely relevant, and this is why we think that C101 might be not enough, because we think that you keep the motivation by understanding yourself the benefits, and then you go to the classroom having this personal experience, and you are able to share this experience with the students. Otherwise, it's just following a manual, a book. I think personal experience, as Tyralynn also emphasized, it's crucial.
One more thing, just to throw it out there, is the C101 is really just an orientation, as Hans said. It's really not, we really encourage educators to go through an actual workshop, either online or eventually, when the world permits, in person. That's really going to be the process towards sustainability.
Can I just add onto that?
Yeah, please.
Really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you, Tyralynn, so much. Really beautiful to see how much it's developed in such a short time. And just, yeah, that crucial question always is scaling up and maintaining quality and integrity of the teachers. And I think it's kind of almost at two levels that you've already talked about. I mean, the champion teachers, the ones who go in and start to, you need them to embody it so much. And how do you maintain that? But the other thing is, I think, is the systems aspect that plays out within the school system too. So the more, I mean, we know that from the research on implementation of mindfulness in the UK, that it's that combination of champion teachers with administration who begins to see the value of this, and when that clicks together, then over time you go slowly, it begins to grow. But it's also so key, isn't it, that school leaders understand that this is not your average professional development. So it's not, you have a cascade approach, but because it depends on the quality of the people teaching it and the time it takes to develop their capacities too, then people who are, leaders who get enthusiastic need to understand that whole point that, okay, I want this in my school. I've got 2 champion teachers, get them to teach, 10 more people and we've done, But of course, it's not like that. It needs to go slowly. That encountering and engaging with it on a personal level is so important. That's a different kind of model to what schools are used to. So you're trying to span those 2 areas. I think that's so. It's difficult for that. All the research science you have that can really help, and then the feedback from schools as they're doing it and building that community. when schools tell you how it's worked in their situation is so key. But fantastic work.
Yes, thank you. I think you got to a very important point, and as you said, this is a challenge, and sometimes we have the feeling we are going against status quo. Things have been done like this for many years, and there is a closeness to other ways of envisioning education itself. But I think we have in favor that there is a huge crisis, and many things are falling apart. And our experience, it's probably also your experience, that there are some schools who are becoming very open-minded, maybe because they have the need, and so they are seeking for a solution, an emergency solution. That I think you got to a very important point. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to really very sadly need to bring it to an end there. I think we could listen all day. We should have given you a whole day conference, really, you guys, because you've such rich data and information. Great, we've recorded it. Very kind that you're letting us share the slides. That's really good. And I'm sure many of us would like to keep up a dialogue with you all. The questions you asked, Tyralynn, are very appropriate for the CCE as a whole. How do we build research capacity across Europe? How do we work together? And I'm hoping that we might have a rematch in a year's time so we can hear how it's coming on, because it would be very nice to have a, in a year or 18 months to have an update on how this is developing. I think that would be really lovely. So I think sadly that has to be that now. Just to wish all of you a lovely day, and to thank the three presenters from the bottom of our hearts. You put such a lot of effort into this, such rich information, and such a fantastic program. I think we all feel very privileged to have listened.
Thank you for moderating this dialogue today, and thank you for this, the Minor Life Europe team for organizing this today, and for all of you to be here with us today and to engage actively in the dialogue. We are looking very much forward to continue this with you.
We'll save the chat, and we'll leave the room open for a little while, just to people can put any further questions on there. So we'll leave that chat.
Catherine, I want to say before we all sign out that, and we'll do this by email, we have something really exciting for the Mind and Life Europe friends in regard to an education webcast, and which we would like to inform you about, which we'll make available in October, which will feature Catherine, but a number of others as well. So that's coming up, and you'll surely be interested in that. And then another thing we're going to have to organize soon is when and how and with whom we want to do our next webinar, because we want to, we found that this format is really a wonderful one, and there's a lot of interest. And this has been a huge. A lot to take in, I would say, and to digest, and we want to keep that ball rolling. So I think we're going to have to do this offline to figure out and solicit. We have some offers already for the next webinar sometime in October.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel sad to go now. I feel I just got revved up, really. But thank you.
Thank you.
Lots of thanks for appearing on the chat. I hope the team appreciate that.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.